Okay, welcome to the afternoon session of the fiction stage here. Peter Vankovich, if you see any of the ushers or have any questions, please check with us. You all see our uniforms on right now. I just want to introduce you to Lynn Nari. She's the arts correspondent for NPR, and I will add she's on a lot of shows. I don't think I ever turn on when I'm driving and get on NPR, which is my #1 station, without hearing Lynn on one of the shows there. So welcome, Lynn.
Good to be here. So it's so good to be here again. This is the 4th time I've come to the National Book Festival to interview wonderful authors like Jin Lee. And I love this event, as I say every year, because I feel like it brings all the book lovers in Washington, D.C. together in one huge building. And there's this great energy around books and reading. And one of the questions that I get a lot as the books and publishing correspondent for NPR is, how do you choose the books? And I was thinking about this as I got ready for this interview because I feel like I helped discover Pachinko. I interviewed Jin Lee pretty early on, and I was thinking, well, how did I? Because we get a lot of books. And you're not supposed to judge a book by the cover, but I really liked that cover. And I saw the word, and I saw Pachinko, and I didn't really know what that was. And then I read something about it, and I realized it was this game in Japan. And I remembered when I was in Japan many years ago, I had seen these brightly colored parlors all over the place. And then I realized that the cover was actually a picture of a Pachinko board, and I thought that was pretty cool. Then I read it was about Japanese Koreans, and I thought, I don't know anything about that. And then I read that they were somehow involved with Pachinko. So put that all together, I was very intrigued. So I opened the book, starts with a love story. What's wrong with that? Then it moves on to historical fiction. Then it becomes a family saga. Then it ends as a coming-of-age story. It's what every fiction lover loves. What was not to love about Pachinko? So that was how I discovered the book, and I'm happy that I may have helped some of you hear about it through my interview with Jin Lee, because I had not read your first book, I have to be honest with you, which is Free Food for Millionaires. And I know that it took you a long time to write Pachinko, right? How long?
30 years.
And you didn't know very much about Korean Japanese when you started, did you?
Oh no, I knew nothing. Absolutely nothing. But before we talk, I just want to embarrass Lynn a little bit because I have the stage. So I just wanted to thank you so much for your championing of this book, because for a person like me, from my background, for people who take 30 years to write a book, if you don't have a really smart, prize-winning journalist saying, please read this book, it's actually really hard to break out of the fray. So there are 600,000 to 1 million books published every year in America. They all go to her office.
It's true. And I have to tell you, we didn't have an intern.
Thank God for that cover.
Yeah. We didn't have an intern this summer, so you should see the books piling up at NPR right now.
No, I'm judging the National Book Awards this year, and there's 370 books for fiction.
I'm going to ask you about that before we start talking about Pachinko, because that means you have to read 370 books?
I can't talk about it. But yes, everybody has gotten my attention, and that's all I've been doing, because I just read and read and read some more.
I don't even understand how you read that many books in a year.
It's really hard. It's really hard, and it's really hard to write.
Yeah.
When you're reading. I mean,
Yeah.
We're reading all the time.
Yeah.
And eating a lot of chocolate for me.
Well, let's talk about Pachinko.
I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you.
Well, you're welcome, because I really do. This is a wonderful book for those of you who haven't caught up with it yet, and I think a lot of you have, which is why you're here. But I just wanted to ask you about, you yourself, how you sort of stumbled upon this subject, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So when I was in college, I had all these problems. I'm sure none of you did. But I was a history major, which means that I knew my direct path in life. So I was totally lost, and I was dating this really bad guy. It's all true. And the head of my residential college said, would you go to a master's tea, which now it's called like the head tea or something like that. And nobody wanted to go. because it was an American missionary talking about the Korean Japanese, a very sexy topic. So I went because the person who asked me was a minister, and it's really hard to say no to Harry Adams because he's a really great person. So I went, and so it was me and another guy named Wilson. So there was two of us. There's an American missionary who's dedicated his entire life to serving the poor Korean Japanese. So I felt like I had to go. And then Harry Adams, there's four of us, a humongous plate of cookies. It was about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And he talked about the history of the Koreans in Japan, and I knew nothing. And I thought it was really sad and, very moving, but then I didn't think that I was going to spend my life doing this, because I didn't know what I was going to do with my life.
Yeah.
But he mentioned this one story of a little boy who had climbed up to his apartment building, and he jumped off to his death immediately following his middle school graduation. And it turned out that he was ethnically Korean, his parents were ethnically Korean, and his parents were trying to figure out why this would happen. And they went through his middle school yearbook, and his Japanese classmates had written, "Go back to where you belong. I hate you." And they wrote, "You smell like kimchi." And they wrote the words, "die, die, die." And I think it just moved me in a different way, because that was not my experience of living in America, because I was an immigrant.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Queens, and I had so many people be so incredibly kind to me. And I know that's not the experience of all Asian Americans in this country, but because I grew up in Queens, and I went to high school in the Bronx, I was really normal.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised by it. And then when I quit being a lawyer, I started to work on this book.
Yeah. And you had to do a lot of research.
Yeah.
But you interviewed a lot of people. I mean, I think, tell us a little bit about that part of the research.
Well, you know that what you read versus what people say are so different. And the way people present are so different. So I don't know if you know this, but I had a very serious speaking issue until I was almost in high school. I didn't really talk to people, and it wasn't because I didn't know English, it's just because I had all this social anxiety. So I took all these classes and all these things. But one of the ways that it allows me to talk to people is if I feel like I have a formal interview, then I feel like I can ask questions and it's not rude, because I do have a billion questions in my head, but then I feel like, well, that doesn't seem quite right to just talk. So I started to interview all these Korean Japanese people in Japan, and I learned that all the books that I had read were statistically accurate and factually correct, especially all the history, anthropology, and sociology and law books, because I read all those things. But the thing that was not correct was that most Korean Japanese people that I met, not all, but most, they really don't see themselves as victims. They don't see themselves as some sort of like pathetic patsy who really couldn't figure out what to do. As a matter of fact, they were so defiantly in charge of their lives. And I was like, oh, I have to rethink this. So I had to throw away an entire manuscript that I had written, and I started all over again. And Sunja was really born in 2008.
Sunja is the central character
Right.
in this book.
Because the first book, the main character was Solomon. So if you know the book, Solomon's like this part of the book now. So.
And Sunja, of course, is this young woman who falls in love with the wrong guy, which a lot of us have done over the years, right?
I've done it.
And
I've been dumped by the wrong guy.
But then she's kind of rescued by another man who's a very kind man, a missionary. He's going to Japan, and I was just fascinated in terms of the history, because I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea that so many Koreans had immigrated to Japan at one time. What caused that emigration? I mean, what was the...
So the colonial history of Korea is a really sad one. So from 1910 to 1945, until the war ended, the Koreans were essentially a colony of Japan. So Japan basically owned Korea and acted as such. And there's a lot of revisionist historians who have different points of view about this. But for the most part, it can be agreed that most of the Koreans who went to Japan were economic migrants or forcible labor, but there was definitely both. So in that time, because the Japanese were coming in as the colonizer, they took over a lot of the land. Like 1 million Japanese went to Korea, and over 1 million Koreans went to Japan. but obviously the status is different, right? And then when they did a major land tax, a lot of the farmers as well as the peasants were taken away from their land and their sustenance. So a lot of Koreans, if they wanted to have any viability, went to Japan.
Yeah. The other thing that I found interesting, just historically, was the realization of how people got caught in Japan, in the Korean War. That it really brought to life that the realization of what happened with the partition of Korea at that point.
Right, because in 1945, Korea gets partitioned, and in 1950, you have the war. And as soon as Japan lost the war, so many things happened in Japan, but the first thing that happened for the Koreans in Japan is they lost their citizenship. So they're no longer colonial members. They became stateless. So they could have gone back to South Korea or to North Korea at that point. However, they had cholera in the country. They had lost everything that they had. Most of their family members were dying, and this incredible poverty. And then you had the US government that was in charge of Japan saying you couldn't take more than a certain amount of property back. So imagine if you have $100 worth of something, and they tell you that you can only take $2 back. And then when you go there, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So they stayed.
So we're talking about the history, but this is a novel. And it's one of those great sprawling family sagas.
Oh, thank you.
And I love those kinds of books. And so they're the kind of books you just sort of fall into and get very engrossed. What is it about that kind of a book, first of all, that you like as a writer and a reader, and why did you choose to write that kind of novel to tell this great historical story?
I had no intention of writing this book. And I will never do this again. I turned 50 in November, and I was like, if I had to do this again, it would take another 30 years. So I guess, yeah, at age 80, I might have another book in me. But no, the reason why I would never do this again is because I think I felt a sense of responsibility to the Korean Japanese because I'm Korean American. So I did an incredible amount of research for this book. And then I didn't realize having to deal with that timeline of 80, 90 years. There's a really serious reason why most people don't write this kind of book. And when I first started, I was going to be like a 5-year book. And then this ended up becoming an 80-year book.
Wow.
And it's a lot of wars, and there's a lot of contentious history in there. So I was really afraid of being wrong, because if I offended somebody, then I would hear about it. So, and most of all, I was afraid of offending the Korean Japanese, because they had been so mistreated. And I would never exploit this story for my gain. And also, I didn't expect this today. Like, you guys are a surprise. So, but I do think that the reason why I ended up writing this book is because I don't have an MFA. I majored in history. I went to law school at Georgetown. And then I thought that the only books for me that I kept on returning to over and over again were 19th century omniscient narration. And I wanted to try that. So my first book is also omniscient narration, and so is this one. Those are my books that I really prefer to read more than any other time. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write a social realistic novel about the Troubles, but at the same time to have a really strong human story and a family story. So I ended up writing it this way, but I did not know how hard it was. Yeah. I had no idea.
When did you realize Pachinko had to be not just part of the story, but like a crucial part of the story, that this had to be about Pachinko in some way?
Well, I knew that there were some Koreans involved in Pachinko in Japan, but when I went to Japan, I lived there from 2007
and we should
to 2011.
Say, people might not know what Pachinko is, so maybe you should explain what Pachinko is first.
You're right. No, my publisher always goes, you should talk about what Pachinko is. But I just sort of assume that you guys know. So Pachinko is a $203 billion industry. It's 4% of the Japanese GDP. So it's a corner of the Japanese economy. So it's not like when you and I think about going to Las Vegas once in our lifetime and doing things that are shameful. Not at all. Once a week, 11 Japanese people, 1 out of 11 people played Pachinko once a week. That's a lot.
It's a gambling, and
It's a gambling game. It's an adult gambling game. It's not for kids. It's incredibly noisy. I've never met a Western person who likes pachinko, ever. Like, I've looked. I really researched
And they're very
this.
bright, these parlors, as I recall.
Yeah, they're incredibly bright and garish, and they're open all the time. And yet, because gambling is illegal in Japan still, there are all these different workarounds that they do in order to make it a gambling game. But people play it regularly, not just as a sport, but actually for income. Because you can sort of eke out an existence from playing pachinko. So those people are called pachi pros, pachinko pros.
And so, and this is a way that, this was an industry that the Korean Japanese, they run it, don't they, pretty much?
They are incredibly involved in it. They're dominant in it because people who, unfortunately, due to the colonial history, and even till today, even 2018, the Korean Japanese are not considered full Japanese citizens. And even if they have been living there for 4 generations, they're not considered regular Japanese. Consequently, there's a lot of employment discrimination against the Korean Japanese, and it has been historically for over 100 years. Most Korean Japanese, even if they converted to Japanese citizenship today, face employment discrimination. So one of the industries that really took men was pachinko, and the other industry that took women are barbecue restaurants, Korean restaurants. So that's where the women would end up working, and the men would work up in pachinko. But because pachinko is a gambling industry, people in Japan, even though it's so important, believe that it's very low class. They consider it related to criminal behavior, because it used to be, about 40 years ago, very heavily criminalized. There are parts of it that were quite dangerous, but it isn't anymore. It really isn't anymore. And there's a very little wiggle room because it's so heavily regulated. However, even if you work in pachinko today for, like, let's say you own an advertising company, and you advertise for people in the pachinko industry, you're discriminated against socially because people think of you as somebody who's vulgar, low class, and criminal. And those people tend to be Korean. And again, I was really surprised that even today that people who are ethnically Korean can face this discrimination.
What was it like for you as a Korean going to Japan, having been raised in this country, researching and asking people questions about what it was like to be Korean Japanese? What was it like for you did you experience any discrimination?
Oh, yeah.
Were you uncomfortable in Japan?
Yeah, I was uncomfortable in Japan. And I think the primary reason why I was uncomfortable in Japan is because I've never been treated like that before. And the model minority myth is a very dangerous one for Asian Americans. But in a way, nobody ever, if I walk down the street and, like, let's say I stole something from your purse, most people will probably not think it's me. Most people will probably think I'm good at math. There's a lot of, like, these weird...
Are you?
I'm not bad. And I'm proud of it because I had to really work at it. But anyway, you have all these model minority stereotypes which are really quite harmful to people. However, in Japan, what was really strange is that people thought that I was argumentative and criminal and aggressive. And I was like, wow, no one's ever thought I was aggressive before. That's interesting. But after the initial sort of surprise wears off, you realize that it intersects every aspect of your daily life. So for me, I was visiting, and my husband is half Japanese, so I have Japanese family. So I had kind of an inside connection. But at any point, I could speak the most important, unfortunately or fortunately, language in the world, which is English. So the privilege that you have as an English speaker is so incredibly powerful in Asia, because all of a sudden you can just kind of skip some things. And also, it's not even money. Education and language is an incredible form of power. So that was very helpful. But I don't speak Japanese. So in that sense, I was disempowered, and that was really hard for me. But specific instances of discrimination did occur. So for example, we were renting this really beautiful apartment that my husband's company rented for us, like a place I could never afford to live by myself. And one day, the toilet upstairs was leaking, so I had to call the management company, and they came and they fixed it, but they created a huge hole. And after they fixed it, they said, we're going to come the next day and repair it. And I said, well, I think you have to wait a few days because if you don't dry the plaster, you'll get mold. Because I am neurotic. And I said, well, I'm happy to take off from work, and in 2 days I'll meet you when it's fully dry, and then you can put the plaster on. And the management company said to me, you Koreans are always complaining. And I was thinking to myself, like, it's not even my building. Like, if there's mold, it's your problem. But I thought I was being nice and neurotic.
Maybe you were being a New Yorker.
Right. Point taken.
Well, I'm a New Yorker too, so it's okay. But I think that's so interesting that you can be the same person in two different cultures and be perceived completely, like to have that experience of being perceived completely differently. You're the same person, and yet in one culture, people will think of you as, I don't know, maybe they think of you as shy and retiring. I'm not sure that would be right.
Right.
But certainly not aggressive, but aggressive in Japan. That's interesting.
Well, what's weird is that I didn't really even learn how to talk to regular people until almost high school. I had to take all these classes. So my natural MO is always actually to be very quiet. So I always think that if you're out in public, and I have this Thomas the Tank Engine theory, for those of you who don't know, his whole thing, it's a little train, it's a kid's story. Do you know Thomas?
Yes,
engine?
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Uh-huh.
So what you want to be when you're Thomas is that you want to be a useful engine. So whenever I'm invited to do things like this, I have to go to the bathroom like 18 times.
Yeah.
You were there. So, and I tell myself I have to be useful. So you have to talk, and you have to share things that have use to the audience. Otherwise, it's just vainglory. So it was really surprising to me that if I had the courage to speak in Japan, that people might think that I was being pushy or talkative, which I think is different than when you and I think talking is service.
Yeah.
So
it is. So, all right, so you're in Japan, you're researching this book for many years, and, and then you start to write it. And right from the beginning, did you know Pachinko was that this industry was going to be sort of a through line of this story? Because eventually, Sunya's sons both get into the business, and I won't go into details of how that happens because it would give some things away, I think. But they both get into it, and it gets them out of poverty, but it doesn't get them out of their situation or out of the situation of being discriminated against.
no, and you can't escape it if you're Korean in Japan, even today.
Yeah.
You might be really careful even today of telling people that you're ethnically Korean. And if you are in Japan, any of you, and you meet somebody who's Asian, and they don't seem Japanese, if you ask them, are you Korean, they could be incredibly offended. So please be careful, because they have a sense of privacy that is so intense because you may be entirely innocent in your intentions of asking where you're from or who your people are. But to them, they have faced such extreme discrimination that they may be more reticent about saying who they are. So I get letters, many, many letters every day now from Korean Japanese people saying, my name is, let's say, Junya Tanaka, but then their Korean name is something else, and they'll say, I've never told anybody before. And I think to myself, that must be exhausting, to just always walk around being somebody else and feeling like I can't say what I am. And the analog that I think of in the US is really your religion. So like, let's say you are privately Muslim or privately Jewish, and you have a reason for being private about it. I respect that. And I think, interestingly, in Japan, you really have to be careful.
I was going to ask you about, what's going on with the film Crazy Rich Asians right now, where, it's this #1 film, and based on a book, based on a series of books, actually, and there will be 2 more films because there are 2 more books. But I was going to ask you if something similar is happening among writers, that, there's a sort of particularly Asian women writers seem to be having their moment. We just met Celeste Ng recently. Her book is doing so well. First of all, is that happening? But then before I want to ask you that question, I want to it's making me rethink saying Asian as a sort of descriptive of anybody who looks like you and who is a writer. Is that the correct thing to say? Or, I mean, because you're making, now we're hearing about, the Japanese and the Korean being so different.
Oh, absolutely. Well, what's funny to me is that, and my friends who are Latinx explain it as well very beautifully, which is that in America you have these enormous tents. And Asian America is a huge tent. It's huge because you have East Asians, Southeast Asians, South Asians, and we have such different experiences. So my friends who are South Asian are always telling me to be brown is different than to be East Asian, which is absolutely true. And then, being Sikh versus Muslim versus Hindu is incredibly different, but somehow we're in this tent. Australia once in a while says we're Asian. We're like, I don't know, but okay. I'm full of love. But, when you leave the US, you're not going to find this tent. They think that you're silly if you say you're Latinx, because a person from Honduras versus a person from Mexico have such different experiences.
Yeah.
But I will say that because I know Asian American history so well, I get really upset when we think about the way the Chinese are being discriminated against. I'm not Chinese, but I'm an Asian American, and therefore I feel very connected to federal legislation which barred the entrance of the Chinese only because they're ethnically Chinese. That happened in the US. And they built the railroads in this country. Or I get really upset about the internment, right? So I'm Korean, and here I am being defensive about the Japanese, but that's because I'm Asian American, I'm in this tent. I kind of think it's like a good historical event, but going back to your question of descriptor, it's what we have, and labels and terms are so limited, but it's what we have right now. When someone else comes up with something better,
Yeah.
I'll think about it too. Yeah.
So then I can ask the question.
Sure.
Are Asian writers having a moment now in the same way that Asian actors are?
They're related, right? Because I create IP, intellectual property, which will end up becoming translated into film or TV. And I remember my first book came out in 2007. A very, very famous Tony Award-winning writer went to Hollywood and said, could Free Food for Millionaires be made? And pretty much every door was shut in his face because they said Asians need not apply. That was the message. And then recently, Pachinko has been optioned for an Apple TV show, which I think is going to happen. I was told. We'll see. So to answer your question about is it having a moment, it could be having a moment, but I have to say it's heartbreaking to think about it being a moment.
I know.
Right?
Okay. Well, what other word could we use then?
No. But the thing is, no, you're correct. You're correct to think it's a moment because it is a moment in history. And actually, as we study history, history is made up of different moments. And what does that mean? Will it turn? Like, will the door really be opened? So all these Asian American actors were really freaking out, rightfully so, that this is Asian August. Like did you know that? That was Asian August. But September, what is it? I don't know. So a lot of Asian American actors and writers and directors were thinking, if Crazy Rich Asians does not do well, what does it mean for all the others? When the last one was 25 years ago. And there are many Asian Americans who had to feel pretty mum about speaking about Crazy Rich Asians in any kind of negative way because they felt like if they did, they'd be race traitors. Now, Crazy Rich Asians is in many ways a very entertaining romantic story. It shouldn't have to be the truth. Like, it should just be a wonderful romantic story. And it's limited. Like, there are a lot of people in Singapore who are upset about it.
Right.
And you can follow it if you want to. But I think you're kind of allowed to be one thing. Like, I would like it if, I remember when Spike Lee came out, people were really critical of him.
Yeah.
And I think he gave the right response, which is we should have lots of African Americans making film. And he's right. Like, we should have many different kinds of stories. So I really hope this moment does become an opening of a huge path of different kinds of work, because I think that we're global. We're
Yeah.
global citizens, which means that we have to understand each other as fully human beings, and that comes through different kinds of stories.
Yeah. What do you want people to take away from the story of Korean Japanese that you tell in Pachinko?
I wanted to write a very specific story about this community, but above all, I wanted to talk about what it's like to have to forgive people who hate you. And that's something that all of us have experienced. People have hated us, all of us, for whatever arbitrary reason or for justified reason. How do you forgive and somehow maintain your humanity? Ooh. That was important to me.
And it is no, you're right, because it is a book about forgiveness. And I'm trying to think about that now. Well, it's hard to talk about without talking about what happens towards the end of the book. And there are two sons, and one of them seems to be things are going to be okay, and the other one things aren't okay. Right. And but they both have a pretty rough time.
Yeah.
But still, Sonya's story, from this young, innocent girl who had no idea what she was getting into, to where she ends up in Japan, is just an amazing journey that this one woman has taken. And then we have to see the consequences for her own family, which are, in some cases, tragic.
What I really took away from all of my interviews with the dozens and dozens of Korean Japanese people that I met were that there was always this one generation, the first generation of people who are illiterate usually. So I'm not writing about powerful, elite, rich people. They started out as illiterate, unwanted people who were ashamed of where they came from, and where people are constantly saying that you're not acceptable for who you are. And I was so struck by so many women who are really poor, who are illiterate, who were the beasts of burden for the next generation. And I thought, well, how do I write that story? That's a difficult story because they didn't leave any primary documents behind. And because I was trained in history, I ended up having to do all these interviews, but the interviews were constantly contradicting everything that I was reading because human beings are so contradictory. We don't make any sense. Like, I could intend something, but then I end up doing something else. Like, I had no idea I was gonna cry today. I'm sorry. I'm full of feelings. But I think I wanna be open to my intentions of writing about this community and how the Korean Japanese should be seen. But I also want all of us to experience what it's like to be that character. And this is what fiction does. I think we can identify with people who look nothing like us, who don't have our experiences. People have often asked me, do I identify with Sanja? And I have to say, not really, right? I mean, you and I have privileges that are so extraordinary compared to a person like this.
Right.
And yet, you enter into another experience, like as a parent, you enter into it, or as a sister, you enter into it, and I think that's really important.
Well, and I think that's why making a historical novel like this a family story as well is what then makes it possible for us to understand across generations and across, you know, historical eras and across class lines and race lines and everything else. Because this is a woman who's trying to make things work for her family and the people she loves, and that's something we can pretty much all identify with. Now I'm going to cry. So no, but I mean,
you're the one who made me cry.
I think that's the whole idea of a family saga, don't you think? Of this kind of a book that tells a family story.
I think so. What's really, I feel foolish because I wanted to write a family saga in terms of craft technically well, but in my intention as a writer, that wasn't what I was going for in terms of the story. But what I ended up doing, because I do feel like a minor character in life, that I wanted so much for the minor characters in this book to have a complete storyline. So every single one of my characters, if you plotted it, because I have, they will have a beginning and a middle and an end. And I wanted them to experience this kind of Aristotelian reversal and to have a recognition, and then for you to experience a catharsis. because I needed to be free from this story. Like, I'm so glad this book is done. You have no idea.
So in about 5 minutes, we're going to open the floor to questions, but I want to just ask you one quick question about the minor characters, because I think that's really interesting what you did with the minor characters, and in particular, as an example, 2 of the minor characters you realize are going to become comfort girls, although they don't know it. The last time you see them, they're going off, and if you know the history, and you know the history of the Korean comfort girls, you know these 2 young women, that's where they're headed, and they don't know it. And I thought that was really fascinating. You bring in Nagasaki that way, where characters are going into something that we know happened, and they don't know that's where they're headed. Somebody's heading to Nagasaki. It hasn't happened yet. And I thought that was pretty fascinating what you did with those minor characters.
I wanted all these aspects of history to be in this book, and my ambitions were obscene. I realize that now when I look back and I go, why did you want all of it in there? But I thought, it was 80 years. It had to be in there, because if I left it out, then it would have been really bad. And yet, and I have to go back to this idea of telling fiction, is that now that I'm judging this year and I look at modern contemporary literature, I see why I didn't understand what I was doing. Because I had been looking at so many old books and rereading them to understand how they do it. And I realized that, oh, I guess I could have just written about one character. Why didn't I do that? But I'm not going to. But I do understand that the contemporary fiction mode isn't what I do. So in that sense, I don't really belong in this canon.
Well, I know that you can't read right now because you're reading, 377 books or whatever it was you said. But are you, and I know that you've been so busy, this book is so successful, did it change your life completely?
It's changed my life completely. It has.
How so?
I haven't seen the money for it yet. To be honest. People keep thinking like, wow, your husband can retire. I'm like, no. No. As a matter of fact, last year, this is kind of a funny, sad story, but my husband lost his job on my pub day.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine? So in the morning of my pub day on February 7th, he calls me, and he'd never lost his job before. And he said, I lost my job. And I was like, what the fuck? Pardon me.
We can bleep that.
Yeah. Can that be edited? I was so upset. And then he was such a prince, though, because even at the book party that our friends threw, he was really gracious and kind. But then we thought that he'd get a job right away. But then he got a job 9 months later. So in that time, whenever someone asked me to do anything, I was like, okay, where do I go? So I think I worked a lot harder because I was terrified, and we didn't have health insurance. And that was just so scary to me. And in a way, I did feel, and I was really embarrassed. I was really embarrassed about the things, being in a situation again where I couldn't afford things. I was like, oh, I thought that, I'm gonna be 50, I should be okay. And my son's tuition bill came, and it was so high. So that was just like.
The money's gonna come. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
Yeah.
But one last question for you before we open up the floor, which is, even though it's changed so much and you've been so busy, are you going to write, or do you have an idea for another book, maybe not quite as big as this, or?
Oh, the next book's gonna be really big. So it's a trilogy. I know.
I thought you weren't going to do that again.
No, it's not going to be a historical novel, I don't think. So the first book is Free Food for Millionaires, which is Koreans in America. The second book is Koreans in Japan, Pachinko. And the third one is about the role of education for Koreans all over the world. So it's called American Hagwon. And a Hagwon is a tutoring center. And you have billions of tutoring centers in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. So if you ever see a Korean sign, it says something like Ivy Excellence, SAT tutoring, that's a Hagwon. And there are more and more non-Koreans going to Korean Hagwons now.
Oh,
And I wanted to write about that.
oh, that's great. And now I'm going to open up the floor. If anybody's interested in asking a question, are you right here?
Hi, sorry I had to jump to the front of the line. My name is Soo-Kyung, and I took notes because I'm so nervous. So please bear with me. Your book was incredible.
Thank you.
It's the fourth book that I've read by a Korean author, and so thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Oh.
As somebody who was born to a mother who's deaf, she was born in 1945 in South Korea, it was interesting to see the portrayal of the occupation of Japan so differently. So as my mother, who, was able to tell me about running, and over dead bodies and hiding, like during the Korean War and things like that, and then talking about the Japanese, and like my grandmother still speaks Japanese. She's 96 because she was an educator during the occupation. But then to see like the actual historical pieces that you introduced, the book was like so crazy, mind-boggling. So thank you for that. I mean, as a Korean American, I really appreciated that history. And so actually one of my questions is how did you access that history? And you talked about that a little bit, but I also did want to know how interviewing the Japanese Koreans or the Korean Japanese changed you as a Korean American, and how maybe you understood yourself and your own history and maybe your own identity as it relates to, Korea, the Korean Peninsula, and all the things. Sorry, that was a lot.
So thank you for your generosity. I really appreciate that. So you have two questions. The first question is, how did I do the research? So I really work as a wannabe academic journalist. So I start with this, the very serious academic research always first. I read everything that's very academic, stuff that's not mainstream. And then I do secondary mainstream written research. And then and coterminously, I also interview people of different backgrounds for whatever I'm doing. So both of my books involved over 100, at least 100 people per book. And I even took classes when I needed to. So I work in a really weird way, but I really like it because it gives me a great sense of authority about what I speak about. The second question in terms of how did interviewing the Korean Japanese affect me as a Korean American, is that I didn't realize that I was an angry person. And this anger, I think, is incredibly healthy. I think we Americans have a sense of self-righteousness and indignation, which is incredibly helpful to make change in civil rights. And I think going to law school was really helpful for me, because I believe that even though the wheels of justice take a really long time, as they should in some ways, because you can't have laws changing all the time, but we do need to have those changes. And I believe that it's possible to seek redress for an injustice. And that's a very American idea. It's a very optimistic idea. Whereas when I was in Asia, whether it was in Japan or Korea or even in China, there's a greater sense of just the way it is.
Right.
So we have to work around things. So I understand when people have to work around the situation, but I also believe that you can have direct redress, and we should at least try. And I think that's a good kind of anger that Americans have.
Speaking of minor characters, thank you for the disabled father. I appreciate that character, even though he was very minor. Just as somebody who is born to somebody who's deaf, it's nice to see that in literature.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we'll go to this mic next and then to you.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you again for speaking. My mom is actually Korean Japanese, and this is the first time I've ever seen any sort of literature like this. I have to admit I'm only like 40 pages in, so I'm sorry, but it meant a lot as an Asian American, because my Korean American friend actually recognized that as an important story for me to know. And I would say that my Korean Japanese family never really talked about it. I didn't know until I was like 18 or 19, like really understood that we were actually Korean. It was sort of like a family secret, I think, a societal secret. And I really would like to know your experience with talking to Korean Japanese people, or also Japanese people, and saying, did you ever say, I'm writing this book about Korean Japanese people, and what were sort of their reactions, both from the Korean Japanese and Japanese people themselves? You mentioned your husband is half Japanese, so how did his family react when you said, I'm gonna uncover this part of society, as I know that's not something a lot of people in Japanese society want to talk about as an issue?
Oh, it's a really great question. I think you really want to understand how I approach speaking to the Korean Japanese about my task. And I think that two things that you should know is that I write fiction. So most people think that I'm entirely harmless. And you'll never be quoted directly. And I would always give my interviewees the option of being acknowledged or not. And some people chose not to be acknowledged because they didn't want people to know that they had spoken to me about their families, which I respected. So it's true, I am harmless because you'll always be cloaked in fiction. And then secondly, I think that they thought that it was adorable. That I was going to try, because no one has actually ever written a novel about the Korean Japanese for adults in English ever. This is the first book. I know because I've done the research, and if you look for it, it's not there. And there are books in translation, but there's nothing right now that I could think of that's an epic 80-year-old family saga about the Korean Japanese. But I don't know if you know, but there's 3 different kinds of Korean Japanese people in Japan today. You could be a South Korean passport-carrying Korean Japanese. You could be a North Korean card-carrying person. So even today, there are Korean Japanese who identify with North Korean government, and they send their children to school from kindergarten all the way up to university being identified with North Korea. And those people cannot travel outside the country because North Korea and Japan don't have a diplomatic relationship. And the third kind of Korean Japanese person is somebody who becomes a Japanese citizen in the way that I've become an American citizen. And all those 3 are very different. And I interviewed each one of those groups. And their personalities are totally different. It isn't like meeting a Korean from LA and a Korean in Philly. We're different, but not that different.
Okay, thank you. Sir.
My supervisor at work is Korean American, and he spent about 4 years at Tokyo University in Japan and did experience discrimination there, even at Japan's leading university. And the stories are very moving that he told me. But yesterday we had lunch, and the main topic of discussion was the lawsuit against Harvard University on the discrimination against Asian Americans. And he does feel there is discrimination even at America's leading institutions. And I wanted to get your opinion on that as an attorney.
Okay. You know, they told me that I don't have to answer every question, but this is a tough one, and it's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it because discrimination comes in many different ways. I'm going to tell you right now that I do not agree with Edward Blum and his lawsuit. And the reason why I don't believe in what he is doing personally is because I don't think he has good intentions. I think there's truth and there's intentions, and they both have to be aligned for me. So I do not believe that Asian Americans are supposed to be fighting other people who are beneficiaries of affirmative action. I believe in affirmative action. That said, I believe absolutely that these admissions offices throughout this country are giving Asian American children lower scores. That is truly happening. So if I had to fight, I would say we need to have more transparency in the admissions offices, because what's happening right now to Asian American children in this country is truly diabolical. So yes, I believe they've been discriminated against. However, I do not agree with Edward Blum and his purposes. I believe that we should be going after legacy admissions. And I went to a fancy pants school too. And I also believe that we need to be really thinking about how our kid gets in, not because we're against that child getting in, but because for that child, he or she needs to understand how this all works, because children are talking about it anyway. These are young adults. They know what's going on. However, I do believe that affirmative action is incredibly important. And there's many different ways we could understand this topic without having Asian Americans being pitted against African Americans. I think that's reprehensible.
All right, we literally have 1 minute left. Do you have a short question that requires a short answer?
Okay. I hope mine is short. I wanted to ask, what subtleties of Korean language, or rather, in work that I've done in translation, I've found that there are some things that are hard to render in English in their full capacity. What were some of the challenges you faced when translating these Korean voices into English.
Can I add a follow-up, just because my question was very similar to that? I liked how you chose to use certain Korean words throughout the book without actually defining them, but I felt that I knew what they were when I was reading them, and I thought that was an incredible literary tool that you use. And
Okay, she's got to answer it.
wanted to know why you chose those words and how you chose them.
So
got
those
30
questions
seconds.
are definitely paired, and thank you.
I have one on Pachinko as a game, as a metaphor for how the Japanese people have been treated.
All right.
Koreans
okay.
have been treated.
You have really given her a challenge, I have to say, because we're actually out of time. But go ahead.
Just bring it, okay. So I found that in my interviews, I often try to replicate the voices that I heard. But because I work like a wannabe journalist, I'm constantly trying to understand the meter and rhyme of the way people talk. So that's one. And then secondly, to answer your question, I chose the words which I believe that we global citizens should know about Korean. In the same way, when I went to law school, I learned Latin phrases like res ipsa loquitur. Or when I read 19th century novels, there are French phrases that I needed to learn if I wanted to know that in the Russian court, the diplomatic language is French. So in order to be an educated person of a certain view, we had to know certain phrases in European languages. I am positing in an almost an obnoxious way, with great audacity, that you should know some Korean. And the last question about the metaphor is that Pachinko is a gambling game, and as you know, in Las Vegas or elsewhere, the house always wins. Pachinko is rigged because the house will always win. Most of us, I would argue almost all of us, are on the outsides of the world and in terms of connections. And yet we still have to play a rigged game all the time. And so I'm arguing that Pachinko is like life. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much.